Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of His eye. Let's get to work. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to be doing a two-part series on a topic that has guiding our lessons over the past few years. The topic is the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, or tracking the seed of the serpent and tracking the seed of the woman. This all comes from the first book of the Bible, Genesis, in chapter 3, where the Most High speaks to the serpent after having confronted the serpent as to why the serpent did what was done with regard to the woman. The serpent was told that the seed of the serpent was going to bruise the heel of the seed of the woman, and the seed of the woman was going to bruise the head of the seed of the serpent. And that saga has been playing out throughout history up through present day. So the Most High wants us as His people to know that this warning that He gave us in Genesis chapter 3 is still in effect today, and we need to know who is who. So for our first iteration, we're going to be looking at the serpent of old, called Satan or the devil. It's not a person, it's a spirit. And that spirit is represented in the form of a serpent or a dragon. So we're going to be looking at how that dragon has been operating and why that dragon is doing what that dragon is doing, because it is affecting the entire world. There is another spirit called the seed of the woman. What we're going to be doing is looking at the seed of the woman as well. But one of the markers of the seed of the serpent is the marker of bringing death to every situation. The Most High is about life. The seed of the serpent is about death. And therefore, the seed of the woman is also about life. So as that is playing itself out in our day and time, we're going to be looking for the next couple of hours at scriptures that are talking about that specifically. And we're going to be looking in this first session at two areas: genocide and ethnic cleansing, both of which are hallmarks of the seed of the serpent. We're going to be bringing up a slideshow that is going to bring out the various aspects of the seed of the serpent and how that has affected and continues to affect the world that we live in. So we'll pull that up first. We're going to start first for this Shabbat with the ramifications of the seed of the serpent. So we're looking specifically at how the seed of the serpent, or the role that the seed of the serpent has been playing in the past several hundred years. Most of us understand that when we talk about the serpent, as Revelation chapter 12 indicates, and also at the very end of Revelation, that the seed of the serpent is called that old serpent, that serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan. So we're actually talking about the negative exploits of this entity that is called Satan. We, in many ways, anthropomorphize Satan. In other words, we make Satan a personality that can fit into a red suit with a tail and horns. But in actuality, the seed of the serpent is a dragon. In biblical understanding, the dragon is representative of anything that is moving against the will of the Most High God. And so one of the hallmarks of being in the will of the Most High God is the respect and reverence for life, L-I-F-E, to such a degree that is, in essence, what the gospel is all about. The gospel is about the restoration of life to mankind, because mankind has fallen into the snares of the realm of the dead. And so when we look at the seed of the serpent, anything that has to do with death is a part of the seed of the serpent. With that as the background, then, what we're going to be looking at in this session is the ramifications of death as it plays itself out in the geopolitical world. So this first slide encapsulates what we're going to be looking at: 2 centuries of ethnic cleansing and genocide for territory and resources. This slide encapsulates one of the major tactics and strategies of the seed of the serpent, because on the planet, territory is important, resources are important, because when you're in control of territory and resources, you can control the people on the territory and the resources that they need. And so if the serpent, and when the serpent is able to take territory and resources, that is the serpent's way of striking at the heel of the seed of the woman. The seed of the serpent's way of striking at the heel of the seed of the woman. So that's why we're looking at this. Now, in our next iteration, we're going to go back to an earlier examination of the people group that has been used over the centuries, over the same time period, and actually even longer than that, by the serpent to accomplish these tasks. So we'll go ahead and get started. Once again, it says 2 centuries of ethnic cleansing and genocide for territory and resources, specifically from the early 1800s up through present day. It's a global history, and it's an analysis of how ethnic cleansing and genocide have been used to seize land, labor, and resources. Okay, I posed a question about the difference between genocide and ethnic cleansing. And so this gives a working definition that we're going to be using to examine it. Genocide is the intentional destruction of a group based on ethnicity, religion, or nationality. Ethnic cleansing is the forced removal of a group to create an ethnically homogeneous area. And as it says here, there are common motives: land, wealth, power, ideology, or security. So when we're looking at those two, genocide and ethnic cleansing, they're not necessarily the same, but they have common purposes that lead to a common outcome. So in the 19th century, there are several examples. The most obvious that this country is absolutely in denial of, but it's all in the documents, and it's all in how the society configured itself. It's encapsulated in the Indian Removal Act of 1830s. We often tell ourselves as a nation that we came to a land that was, for the most part, without people, and the few people who were here were either docile and needed to be controlled, or they were hostile and needed to be eliminated. And so once a critical mass of people had, from Europe, from Western Europe primarily from England and Germany, and some from France, when they got here, once they had a critical mass, then they began to enact laws that would be in favor of genocide. And so that's where the Plains Wars, or the other name for it is the Indian Wars, and it all had to do with the cleansing of the land of its native population or indigenous population. Now, that was happening in what we call the United States of America, but it was also happening in Argentina. The conquest of the desert in the 1870s and 1880s was also against indigenous peoples for the same reason that was being prosecuted in the United States. And also over on the continent of Africa, the German Empire, Herero and Nama genocide, 1904 to 1908. That was going on in Namibia. So these are several of the 19th century examples of ethnic cleansing and genocide. In the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire on the continent of Europe, dealing with the Armenian, the Assyrian, and the Greek genocides. That's from 1915 to 1923. In the Soviet Union, Holodomor and ethnic deportations in 1930s through the 1950s. That's underneath people like Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin. Nazi Germany would be another in the early and mid 20th century. The Holocaust, the pursuit of Lebensraum. And then in the mid-late 20th century, 1945 to 1990, in China, the Tibetan and the Uyghur population. In Cambodia, during my middle 20s and into the 30s, the Khmer Rouge genocide, which happened right at the end of the Vietnam War. In Guatemala, back over in South America, the Maya massacres during a civil war of the 1980s. And then in Africa, the Congo, the Free State atrocities under Belgium. Others in the late 20th and early 21st century, Rwanda in 1994, 800,000 plus Tutsi and moderate Hutu were killed. In Bosnia, 1992 to 95, the ethnic cleansing of the Bosniaks. In the Sudan, Darfur area, 2003 to the present. That's over 20 years. the displacement of non-Arab groups, the Myanmar genocide from 2016 to the present, Rohingya expulsions. So the common tactics and the common patterns, first of all, in order to conduct genocide, in order to conduct ethnic cleansing, you must dehumanize the people that you're trying to destroy. So in order to dehumanize them, you do that through propaganda. And the propaganda portrays them as targets. They're portrayed as pests or threats. And then once the society has been inculcated with the images, the press releases, the consistent line of demonization of a people group, once enough people have bought into that, then you can forcibly displace them. And you do that through marches, refugee camps, mass deportations. You seize their assets, so the economics is a part of it. You confiscate their land and their assets. And then culturally, you erase them. You ban their languages. You destroy their heritage. These are all common tactics and patterns when we're looking at what you do when you want to ethnically cleanse or commit genocide on a people group. So why do you do that? That's a question that sane people should ask. Well, one of the reasons is for resources. The people who are being displaced, the people who are being destroyed, are either living on land that is very fertile, that has the capacity to produce, whether it's food or minerals, precious metals, produce resources that will be of economic benefit to those who have their eye on them. So that's one of the major motivations. And to put it very bluntly, you have stuff that other people think they should have, even though it's supposed to be yours. Ideological purity, defending a culture or a nation, that's a motivation. Political control, and political control is almost always framed as security and safety or counterinsurgency. And it's always been fascinating to me how you can go into people's lands and call them insurgents. That's amazing that people actually buy that. It's like me coming into your house, and because you don't want me there and you try to kick me out, I say, you're the problem, so you need to be dealt with. So those are some of the underlying motivations. Globally, an estimated 200 plus million souls have either died or been displaced over the last couple of centuries. We're only talking about a short period of time here. So we could say that this is a modern day snapshot of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Population shifts occur when that happens across Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Now, the Americas we know most about because the people who are living in the United States of America are not the indigenous people. So the genocide and the ethnic cleansing have allowed for a completely different group of people to be here and then have the temerity to say, this is our land, and if you don't like it, then you have to leave. And they would say that to people who have been here for thousands of years. And then the emergence of international law. Now, this is a very tricky one, but society is always attempting to create a balance. So whenever things get out of balance, there's always some countervening activity or action to try to bring things back into balance. So when the Nazis were being held accountable for the genocide on the Jewish people in Germany, there were the Nuremberg trials. There's a convention called the Genocide Convention, or in more modern times, the International Criminal Court, the ICC. Those initiatives don't always carry the day. As a matter of fact, they hardly ever carry the day. They are attempts of balancing out the negative implications of genocide and ethnic cleansing. But those who are in power usually are in control of these international attempts. And so if the people in power were actually the ones propagating the genocide or the ethnic cleansing, then those entities become not only ineffective, but of no use to their original purpose. The United Nations should have been placed on this list as well, because the whole purpose of the United Nations is to stop those kinds of things from happening. But as we all know, that's not what is happening. So what can we learn in modern times? One of the things that we can learn is that the propensity for ethnic cleansing, the propensity for genocide is ever present, which is why it is a part of the seed of the serpent. As long as there is a serpent, there's going to be genocide, there's going to be ethnic cleansing, because that's what promotes death. And death, as any gun runner or banker will tell you, is very profitable. So the early warnings that the society can pay attention to has to do with hate speech, for instance. If you're living in a society that is embracing hate speech, such as the society that we live in, that is a society that is moving headlong into genocidal activity. And in the case of where we live, it's returning headlong to genocidal activity because it started out with genocidal activity. So hate speech, propaganda, demographic targeting. Well, what's demographic targeting? Voter suppression is an example of demographic targeting. Focusing on people who have brown skin and are just walking down the streets and are able to be taken off the street with no legal recourse is demographic targeting. The role of the media. At one point, the media was at least neutral in the sense that it would report on atrocities. Now the media's job is to support whatever the state or those who are in power are doing. So if those who are in power want to ethnically cleanse a neighborhood, then the media is going to be putting out stories vilifying the poorest in those neighborhoods, so that they can be driven out of those neighborhoods and the neighborhood can be gentrified, and therefore the people who used to live there no longer will. So the media is very important in that process. NGOs, non-governmental organizations, we see those mostly in South America and on the continent of Africa, a little bit in some of the other places where there is conflict. You will find NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in the background making sure that the environment that is being set up is conducive for genocide and ethnic cleansing. And of course, if you can get the courts in your pocket, then you have a trifecta, and it's almost unbeatable. Because again, this is the seed of the serpent. It transcends the person who may be promoting these things. The person promoting it is fulfilling a role. And if that person dies today, there will be someone else put in that role to fulfill that role. Part of the job of the media is to get our attention on the personality rather than the system or the spirit that is producing all this death. And so that's how you get an ongoing situation like in the Sudan. The Sudan is, as we speak, undergoing genocide again. Now, and that's just over across the waters. In South America, you can see the same thing happening in Brazil or Venezuela. I had given the example, well, of course, Colombia, Mexico. So the lessons are here. And all of this is the playing out of the machinations of the seed of the serpent. This is all demonic. It's all unholy. And most of it is supported throughout the society, but certainly beginning with those who have the power to enact protocols that will enhance the capability of people who are committing the genocide or committing the ethnic cleansing. So that's why we have to understand the importance of it. Okay, so this last portion, there were several other items under ethnic cleansing that I wanted to touch on, ethnic cleansing and genocide that I wanted to touch on. The definition of ethnic cleansing, again, is it refers to the systematic removal of an ethnic, religious, or cultural group from a particular territory by force or intimidation, usually to make the area ethnically homogeneous. So some of the common methods are forced deportation or displacement, intimidation and terror campaigns, destruction of homes, villages, and cultural sites, murder and rape as tools of fear, population transfer, and segregation. And the Bosnian War was an example of that. When it comes to genocide, the UN defined genocide as the intentional destruction in whole or in part of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The goal is the elimination of the group itself. Methods are mass killings, forced sterilization or prevention of births, imposing conditions leading to death, such as famine and disease, which would affect the healthcare system, for instance, separating children from their group, destruction of cultural identity and heritage. The most poignant example is the Holocaust, where Nazi Germany sought to annihilate the Jewish people. Campaigns of ethnic cleansing can lead to genocide when the intent shifts from removal to total destruction. For example, during the Rwanda genocide, what began as a political and ethnic targeting turned into full-scale genocide of the Tutsi population, expanding on the Rwandan genocide. The colonial legacy and ethnic division, when it comes to the root cause, European colonial powers, first Germany, then Belgium, institutionalized ethnic differences between the Hutu and the Tutsi. Before colonization, the Hutu and Tutsi were social classes more than fixed ethnicities. Intermarriage and mobility between the groups were common. Under Belgian rule, identity cards were issued labeling every Rwandan as Hutu, Tutsi, or Twa, turning fluid social identities into rigid racial categories. This is a technique that is used over and over again, primarily by Europeans. So that's what I wanted to read. And just the see. Yeah, I'll stop there. So the example that we're ending with is specifically the Rwanda genocide. But this is typical of how genocides operate, and you can see how systematic and how systemic the whole milieu is, and it's for specific purposes. Of course, the people themselves are always blamed, but those who are the true perpetrators are the outsiders. And that's what is happening in almost every instance of conflict. This is why we keep saying that this is all part of the seed of the serpent, which is based on hatred, which leads to death. The seed of the woman has been given from heaven, the seed of love, which leads to life. And so if we are the seed of the woman, we need to be promoting life, not ethnic cleansing, and certainly not genocide. Father, bless you and keep you. Father, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Father, lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.